repeater close to his house, and it was, I think, 152 megahertz, roughly. And when that repeater came on, it came right through his receiver. And what was going on is the fact that your receiver will take signals in the air, and if they happen to be at the right difference in frequencies, it's going to look like a signal to your intermediate frequency amplifier, which is another part of the receiver. So we talked about it a bit, and I said, well, gee, we probably can do a notch filter. He says, yeah, let's give it a try. So he gave me a call, said, I got a couple of parts here, but it doesn't seem to be working right. Can we have the next slide, please? And what he had was really two parts. It was a coil, an inductor, and a capacitor. And I put this in here just so that it would be a representation of the transmission line. So what we were going to do is, in the vicinity of his receiver, or his transceiver, is hook up these two parts and short the offending signal to ground. Okay, well that's all right, but you don't want to short out your transmitter when you key it up. And he had an antenna analyzer, and so I talked to him and I said, where does it go to 0 ohms? So he took his little antenna analyzer and he said, oh, about 153 megahertz. So he said, that's 0 ohms, that's a short circuit. Well, we could always tune it up a little bit better and get it where he needed it. And I said, before we do anything else, what does it look like at 148 megahertz? And he came back and he said, 20 ohms. Oh. We could create an awful lot of smoke either in the parts or in his transceiver, which we didn't want to do. Let's go to the next slide. Now this is a bunch of mathematical representations. And what was real funny is he told me the effective values, and I plugged them into the math, and this is the line I got. And I said, holy cow, look at this. 148, there's the 20 ohms. Well, that's no good. You know, I was thinking, well, there's some other little thing in the circuit that we weren't thinking of. Well, after a night's sleep, I said, well, wait a minute. If I go to my handy-dandy formulas that, you know, are all in the handbooks and things, it says that in this network, I just have to do this representation, and it says I got to make the capacitor smaller. Okay. So I started with a circuit, just mathematically, making the capacitor smaller. I maintained the resonant frequency, and I made the inductor bigger. And boy, look at this. We can get a collection of parts that at 148 megahertz is not going to do any damage at all to our rig. Then I looked at the value of the parts. And the capacitor was so small, it's physically impractical to build. I think 2 antennas off from a flea separated by a foot might have been too much. So sometimes you can do things mathematically that you can't get in reality. He did get a hold of a bandpass filter, which we're not going to talk about, but it's a different type of thing. It's a much more complicated thing and a much bigger part, and it's working. However, we might get to looking at what these cavities really do and how they do this kind of a function, because a cavity can do this. And generally that's what's used in our repeaters. Okay? So that's all we have on the Tech 10 tonight. Just a little bit on what a series tuned circuit can do for you. The frequencies are right, the parts can be real. It's a neat little gadget.
Is that like a tech course?